Hi, I'm Cecilia. Welcome to today's study of Genesis. For more of me, find me on my Facebook, my Instagram, LinkedIn, and also my website. With them, you'll know more of who I am and what I stand for. I welcome you to today's study of Genesis. Today we're going to continue on Genesis chapter 24. Last week we looked at chapter 23 where we saw the death of Sarah, Abraham's wife, and how Abraham bought the land from Ephron in the place called Hebron, and there he buried his wife Sarah. So he bought that land as a burial place for his family, and it was called Machpelah. And we'll have learned about Abraham from previous chapters before that he was called by God in chapter 11 from the land of Ur of the Chaldeans, where his kindred are from, and he was called into the land of Canaan, the land of promise. And God had promised him that he will give him the whole land of Canaan, and that also he will have an offspring, because by then Sarah was barren and she was not able to bear a child, and that his offspring will be as many as the stars in the sky and as the sand in the seashore. That was the promise of God, and that also he will be blessed abundantly in the land that he lived in. And we know that he came from the land of Ur with his nephew Lot, and we have learned about Lot and what happened to him in our previous study of Genesis. And also we have learned in the journey of Abraham how he went on to have his firstborn, who was called Ishmael, and how Ishmael was cast off from the family. And then we also learned of Sarah being pregnant and giving birth to Isaac at the age of 90 years old, and how he lived. We also looked at the test of faith that God gave to Abraham about him sacrificing his own son Isaac, and how he passed that test, and God reassured him of the blessing that he had made to him before. And now last week we learned about Sarah's death, and today we are going to learn more from what happened next now after Sarah died. And we are going to read Genesis chapter 24 verses 1 to 9 and hear what the word of God says. And it says, "Now Abraham was old, well advanced in years. The Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh, that I may make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but we will go to my country and to my kindred and take a wife for my son Isaac. The servant said to him, perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I then take your son back to the land from which you came? Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. But if the wife is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Only you must not take my son back there. So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. And that is the word of God. Then now from what we have read in the passage, what can we observe from it? Firstly, we see that we are told here Abraham is now very advanced in years. I'm sure probably some few years have passed since Sarah had passed away, or some months or something like that, but some time had passed since he buried his wife Sarah. And we are also told that he was blessed in all things in verse 1. That is, we're told that Abraham was blessed by the Lord in all things, so that he lacked nothing, in wealth, in stature, in everything he was blessed. And also we learned that Abraham saw it fit that it is time for his son Isaac to have a wife right now, because as we learned last week, by the time Sarah died, Isaac was around 37 years old. So probably here he's around 40 years old or something like that. And Abraham is well advanced in years. He himself, he cannot go and look for a wife for his own son, because in those days it was the parents who went out and searched or looked for a wife, or made a treaty with another family for the wife. You know, it was the parents who made that agreement of your son will marry my daughter, something like that. And so Abraham here, he is very old. He is not able to go by himself back to his original homeland and get a wife for his son. And we learned in the previous chapter 22 that Abraham was told that his brother Nahor is still alive and has had offspring. So probably Abraham now here has has been reminded or has remembered that his brother actually has children, and probably one of them could make a good wife for my son Isaac, because even then they married amongst the same family, like cousins will marry each other. Like for example, Abraham and Sarah were actually step siblings and they married each other. So in those days it was acceptable to marry your cousin or your own stepsister. So here he remembered that. That's why he asked his older servant to go back to his home country and be able to get a wife from his family, from his kindred, for the son Isaac. And we are told that they made an oath where the servant would put his hand under the thigh of his master. That was how they would make oath, as a sign of submission, that you are submitting under the authority of the man you are putting your hand under their thigh. I think that was the culture back then. And he asked the servant to go back to his home and bring a wife for him. And the servant was like, what if the woman does not want to come back with me? But Abraham was like, had faith in God and told him that like the God that I serve will go before you and he will send an angel before you. And like it's like he was trusting God to lead the servant to the woman who will ultimately make a wife for him, will ultimately become a wife to his son Isaac. And he trusted God for that. And also we have observed that the servant was willing to go. Like ultimately we are told that he agreed to that agreement. And also we know that Abraham cautioned the servant not to take his son back to the land of Ur of the Chaldeans, because the servant was like, if the woman has refused to come, can I take your son back there? But Abraham said, no, the son will remain in the land of promise, the land that God had promised to me. And that is what he said to him. And yes, that is what we can observe from the passage I've just read. So from the observation, what can we learn from it? We can still learn that Abraham still lived on after the death of his wife Sarah. He still had some years after the death of his wife Sarah. And God had blessed him also apparently in the land of promise. He was wealthy, like he lacked nothing that he needed. He had everything. We look like later next week in this study how the servant prepared so many things, so many gifts for the future wife of Isaac. So you can see from that how Abraham was so blessed. And Abraham saw that he was getting older, that it was time for his son Isaac to take a wife. And he went and prepared or arranged for his son to have a wife. Like we see that Isaac had no input in him getting a wife. He was just presented the wife. The wife was presented to him through the working of his father and also the older servant. Since he himself wanted to make the journey, he asked his trusted servant to go on the journey on his behalf and get away from his people. And you can also learn that Abraham knew that the ways of the people of Canaanite was evil or was not right before God. That's why he told his servant that he should not take a wife from amongst the Canaanites, because he did not trust them because of how they conducted themselves in terms of their worship, because they worshipped other gods. In terms of their conduct, they did not conduct themselves the way Abraham and his family conducted themselves, or the way Abraham would want his future generations to conduct themselves. That's why he wanted to preserve, the lineage, or to preserve the community, or to preserve his faith by getting Isaac a wife that would align with his own faith, so that he will not be driven away to worship other gods, like how the Israelites were driven away when they lived in the land of promise, when they later on came to the land of promise in Canaan, and they started like how the Bible says, warring after the gods of other nations and behaving like them, because they had intermarried when God told them not to intermarry. So here we learn that Abraham was keen on that even before the law was given, not to intermingle or intermarry with the pagan people in the land of promise. So that's why he refused his son to marry any woman of the Canaanite. And he knew that his brother Nahor was still alive and that he could find a wife from his family there. That's why he was confident that his servant would find a wife from his kindred. And he trusted that God will lead his servant to find a wife in the land of Ur. And afterward, we will learn in the next study how God actually led the servant to find a wife, that is Rebecca, in that land. Like here, Abraham is asking his servant in faith that God will go before him and he will be able to find that wife for his son Isaac. And in the next study, we'll see how God actually with the faith that Abraham had, went ahead before the servant and acted, and made way so that the servant was able to find Rebecca. And so we see the faith of Abraham here being proclaimed without even him seeing it actually happen. And he was sold on the land of promise, so that's why he forbade Isaac to return back to his homeland or his kindred or his former people in the land of Ur. That's why he said that God has promised this land of Canaan, so we shall dwell here. There is no going back, because Isaac was now his only descendant at the moment. Later on, we'll see how he had other children, but now it was only Isaac. So he was like, Isaac, the son of promise, this is the land we have been promised. There is no way Isaac is going back to the land of the Chaldeans. So he was sold in the promises of God. He believed it fully. That's why he did not want to go back, or his son to go back to his fatherland. He believed in God's promises, that his offspring will occupy the land of promise. And then he believed that God will lead his servant to find a wife for him, saying that the angel of the Lord will go before you. That's what he told his servant. But he also acknowledged that the woman may refuse to the offer. And in that case, if the woman refused to the offer, the servant was then not obligated into the oath. And Abraham affirmed that Isaac was to remain in the land of promise. And that is what we can learn from the study of Genesis for today. And then how then can we apply what we have learned to our faith or to our walk in this life or in the time that we are in right now? Firstly, we believe in God's promises, so that what he has promised will usually come to pass, even though we cannot see it. At the time Abraham was speaking about getting a wife for Isaac, the only land that he owned was a tomb, was a burial place. He would not own the whole land of Canaan, but he still believed in God, that God had promised them this land. So there is no way that, or there is no need for Isaac to go back to the land of the Chaldeans. So believe in God's promises, even when it does not seem like they are happening around you at the time. And also you can apply to remain where God has called you to. We see that in the example of Abraham and also Isaac, that they remained in the land of Canaan. They did not want to move back, or they did not move back to the land of the Chaldeans. They remained there. So remain where God has called you. Even in the New Testament, Paul writes and says, wherever you have been found, wherever God has called you at the time of your calling, remain there. Do not change and think, I need to go somewhere else so that I may be comfortable there. But remain there, because God is still willing and will still use you in the position that you are in. So wherever God has called you, remain at that place and let God use you mightily around the community or the family or the environment that you are in. And then the other thing you can apply is not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers, as 1 Corinthians also tells us. So that here Abraham was like, there is no way my son Isaac is going to marry a Canaanite woman, because they believe in different God, they worship differently, they act differently, they conduct themselves differently, they do not hold the same values as we do hold, they do not have the same principles as we have, they do not hold the same faith that we have. So if my son Isaac goes ahead and marries a Canaanite woman, he will be driven away from the worship of Yahweh. And that is why he cautioned the servant not to allow his son Isaac to marry a Canaanite woman, and go back and get his own kindred, his own family for the wife, to be the wife of his son Isaac. And trust God's leading. Abraham trusted in God's leading. We saw that he told the servant that the Lord will send his angel before you. So trust that God is leading you to where he has called you to, or to where he's directing you to go. He has already gone before you. He has already prepared a way before you, so that as you walk, as you go, you know that the Lord is ahead of you. Like the Lord is our shepherd. And in that time, the shepherd was always walked before the sheep. It was not behind the sheep, it was before the sheep, so that it leads, not it. The shepherd leads. He leads his sheep to where he wants them to go. So even us today, God is leading us. So trust in his leading. He is going before us. He is leading us in the right way. So trust him. Trust the Spirit of God speaking in you, taking you in a different direction, because he is surely leading us. So trust him. I'll trust his leading, because he's gone before you, because also he is our shepherd. And then pray for God's direction, so that, because we're in a place where it's like you have reached a crossroad, pray that he will direct you in the right path to go. And also be a person that your leader will find faithful and trustworthy. We see the old servant that Abraham trusted his future lineage in, because trusting him to go and find a wife for his son Isaac is like trusting him for that lineage that God had promised him, trusting him that will find the suitable helper for Isaac, or the suitable fit, someone who's fit for his son Isaac to be able to bring about that fulfillment or that accumulation of the promises of God. So trust, be that person that who is trustworthy, someone who will be found faithful even with those who are who are leading you, and those whom you are under. So be trustworthy and be faithful in your work, that will be trusted even with the heavier tasks that will be given to you. And the person who trusts you in those tasks will not worry or will not be anxious that they have given you, or he or she has given you that task, because you are faithful and you are trustworthy. And every servant of God, every man of God or woman of God, or every child of God should be found faithful and trustworthy. And that is the mandate that even Jesus Christ left his disciples, to be found faithful and to be found trustworthy and honest in the work that they do. And so that is the study of Genesis for today. So if there's anything else you want to add to it, please write it down in the comment section below. And I thank you for joining me today. Until next week when we see each other again, goodbye and God bless you.